Today we're going to cover the scientific achievements of the ancient philosopher Aristotle. The sources used can be found in the description below. In this video we will cover the scientific thoughts and achievements of Aristotle, as well as learn why he is one of the ancient world's most important characters in the history of ancient science. But before we do that, don't forget to hit subscribe and the bell for more awesome history videos. During a lecture in the academy, the philosopher Plato said to his students, "Today I'm going to tell you about my analogy of the cave and how it relates to my famous awesome theory of the forms." To which one of his students raised his hand and answered, "But Plato, we don't live in a cave." The student's name was Aristotle, and his answer captures the fundamental starting point of his way of studying nature and his break with his teacher's philosophy. According to Aristotle, material objects must exist independently from a perfect form existing in a non-material world. A table, for example, is not an imperfect replica of the perfect form of a table, but simply a material object that shares the same attributes as other tables. Knowledge about a table, as well as the rest of the material world, can't be gained by the means of abstract speculations, but by the use of the senses. Aristotle were in that sense an empiricist, claiming that all our knowledge is based in sense experience. From sense experience, humans get memory, and from memory, by process of intuition or insight, a human is able to discern the universal features of things, and thus gain knowledge. In addition to the rejection of the theory of forms, Aristotle divided material objects into two categories: form and matter, and while that statement seems on the outset to be a complete oxymoron, given Aristotle's rejection of Plato's philosophy, it's important to note that when Aristotle refers to the form of an object, he did not refer to an abstract non-corporeal entity, but simply to the material object's properties. Let's take a white rock as an example. The rock is white, hard and heavy by the virtue of its form, and the rock also consists of matter that serves as a subject that the form is tied to. Matter and form cannot be separated from each other, since it would be meaningless to speak of the properties of a subject without an actual subject to be tied to. It's like if you would try to gather a bucket of red, sharp or heavy. You just can't do it. If you see my video on the early thoughts of Greek philosophy, you will know that the question of change was a topic that was intensely discussed among the pre-Socratic philosophers. Aristotle's position on the question of change was the common sense belief that change is genuine and happens in the material world. To preserve both change and stability, Aristotle appealed to his theory of form and matter. When an object undergoes change, its earlier form is replaced by a new form, while the matter that the object consists of remains unchanged. To overcome Parmenides' objection to the impossibility to get something from nothing, Aristotle proposed three types of being: non-being, potential being, and actual being. To give an example, an acorn is potentially an oak tree, but not an actual tree. In becoming an oak, the acorn goes from a potential state of being a tree to actually being a tree, and through that reasoning, we don't get being from non-being, but rather actual being from potential being. Okay, so that might explain how change is possible, but it don't really explain the mechanisms behind why change happens. According to Aristotle, the cause of change lies in the nature of things. Nature, which Aristotle associated with the form of an object, makes the object behave in a certain way. In the case of the acorn, Aristotle would say that it naturally grows into a tree, because it's in the nature of the acorn to do so. In fact, all change and motion in the universe can originally be traced back to the nature of things. This view of change was very important to how Aristotle came to study nature. In nature, the organs and tissues that makes up the organism will always yield to the natural organism as a whole. To exemplify this, let's take the human body. The human body, according to Aristotle, is not the sum of the nature of the individual body parts, but rather the unique nature of the body as a whole. If we would remove, let's say, an arm or a lung and study it in isolation from the rest of the body, we would, according to Aristotle, not get the same results as we would if we had studied it as a part of the body, since the nature that the part operates by will be different than if it's a part of the whole body. With this theory of nature in mind, Aristotle's methodology for studying nature mainly consisted of observations and gave no room for experiments, since the results from experimenting on an object will be contrary to how the object will operate in its natural environment. The last part of Aristotle's theory of change that we will cover is his view on the different causes of change. To understand the creation or change of an object, we must first understand its causes and explanatory conditions. According to Aristotle, there are 4 different kinds of causes. These causes are the formal cause, the material cause, the sufficient cause, and the final cause. To exemplify this, we can look at the creation of a statue. In the creation of a statue, the formal cause would be the shape given to the statue, the material cause the matter which the statue consists of, the efficient cause being the sculptor who makes the statue, and the final cause being the purpose to why the sculptor chose to create the statue in the first place. When it came to which cause should be given priority over the other 3, Aristotle gave the final cause priority over the material causes, which made his theories about nature and the universe inherently theological and goal-driven, which will become evident when we analyze his cosmology. Aristotle's universe was of course a product of his natural philosophy, and it would serve as a standard model of the universe for almost 2 millennia. The universe, according to Aristotle, was an eternal sphere, with everything existing within it, and nothing that could potentially exist outside of it. Not matter, empty space, nor even time or place. Within this cosmos, Aristotle distinguished between 2 different regions, called the celestial region and the terrestrial region. The terrestrial region lay below the surface of the moon, and it was characterized by constant change and transformation. The region is made up of 4 elements, which are earth, water, air, and fire, and all bodies within the terrestrial region is made up of a combination of at least 2 of these elements. If the element's motion would suddenly cease, they would sort themselves out according to their weight, with the earth element being in the middle, followed by water, air, and fire. The celestial region, on the other hand, is characterized by a lack of change and transformation. The lack of change in this region is due to a 5th element, which Aristotle called the ether. The ether is an eternal substance that suffers from no change except change of place, and because the planets and stars are made of ether, they too suffers from no change. Since Aristotle regarded a low degree of change as superior to a large degree of change, he considered the celestial sphere as nobler than the terrestrial, and he also considered that the celestial sphere therefore should influence what happens in the terrestrial, which made contemporary and future astrologers very positive towards his view of the cosmos. While Aristotle is mostly known for his philosophy of form and matter and his virtue ethics, one important aspect of his work that's often overlooked in popular history is Aristotle's achievements in biology. By Aristotle's time, the study of medicine and human anatomy had been popular for a long time, but Aristotle went further than just theorizing about human anatomy and started to study animals. His greatest work in this field is his History of Animals, which is a vast storehouse of biological information on over 500 species of animals, with detailed descriptions of their structure and behavior. Aristotle divided animals into 2 major categories: blooded, i.e. those with red blood, and bloodless. And from them he created a hierarchy in the animal kingdom, based on attributes such as being 4-footed, laying eggs, having gills, and so forth. Each living organism is constituted of matter and form, with the form being the organizing principle that molds the different organs of the organism into a unified whole. This organizing principle of the form was identified by Aristotle with the soul of the organism, and from that it follows that every organism that exists have a soul. However, as you may realize, this view of the soul is rather different from how people commonly think about it. In fact, according to Aristotle, different organisms have different level of souls. Plants have nutritive souls, which enables them to nourish, grow, and reproduce. Animals also have a nutritive soul, and in addition a sensitive soul, which accounts for sensation and movement. Finally, humans possess both a nutritive soul and a sensational soul, and also what Aristotle called a rational soul, which supplies humans with a higher capacity for reason. Now I could go on about Aristotle's biology for probably more than an hour, but for the sake of time saving, I'm not going to do that. But if you want to learn more about Aristotle's biological achievements, there is a very good BBC documentary on the subject that will be linked to in the description. So after looking at Aristotle's theories and methodologies, most of which have been rejected with the advent of modern science, should they ultimately be viewed as failures? Well, as we learned in the video on the pre-Socratic philosophers, Aristotle's scientific achievements can't be regarded as successful, depending on how well it anticipated modern science, but depending on its success in treating the philosophical problems of its day. And in that regard, Aristotle's achievements are enormous. Not only did he offer sophisticated answers to the problems posed by earlier generations of philosophers, but went even further, creating whole new disciplines, and also creating a system that tied all aspects of nature together into one unified theoretical framework that not only gave theories for how all the different aspects of nature operated, but also methods for how they should be studied. This theoretical framework on how the natural world operates would dominate discussions in the study of nature in the West for almost 2 millennia, and the creation of such a lasting enterprise is frankly something that no other philosopher has done, and that is why Aristotle is one of, if not the most important character in the history of ancient science in the ancient and the medieval world. Today I hope you learned something new about Aristotle's scientific achievements, and don't forget that if you like this video and want to see more awesome videos on the history of ancient science, hit the like, share and subscribe buttons.